the users themselves of your applications have to pay in order to do something. So if it's something monetary, like a monetary transaction, that's fine. But think of it like every time you need to, the same example, I guess, is write a tweet, you need to pay. No one will actually do it. So that is kind of a problematic issue for actual wide user adoption. They need to understand, like, well, cryptocurrency, they need to understand about their private key. At least like they need to know what MetaMask is and other things. Basically it's not grandma friendly in a sense. Like, but I've been seeing a lot of like improvement in the dApp developers where they just go through the same design pattern, log into MetaMask, and then MetaMask will do all the work for you, and you don't have to worry much about it, which is a big plus. Main problem with Ethereum, which is actually main problem with any blockchain, is if you lose your private key, you lose your money, you lose access to a lot of things, which is a huge plus on the EOS side, which basically if that ever happens, there is some way of actually recovering it. If you get hacked, if you got phished, if you forgot your private key, you can actually get it back, and which is a plus, but also might be a minus for some people who think that, okay, this platform is actually centralized because somebody have access to these things. But again, this is done in a decentralized way as far as I know. It's also the nice part is the human readable addresses. It's just like account names, like a Reddit ID or something that you can use to interact with the platform rather than like a 0x blah 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 blah, where you have to like double check, triple check, quadruple check, and be able to like make sure that when you're sending something or you're doing any transactions that you are at the right address. So and the last part is, again, like no fees because the developers have actually paid for it. So in case of adaptability, you would be able to use the platform without having to worry about, oh, I'm actually connected to the blockchain, maybe not, or I'll just like do this. Current market position, as I mentioned before, Ethereum has more developers, have a big community, lots of money, and basically all the applications are there. So keep that in mind if you plan to like develop an application, as compared to EOS, which has the money, has the EOS VC to encourage devs, but has a smaller developer community. And again, since it's new, usually new projects are usually polarizing, and you might hear a lot of news, a lot of like stuff around it. So it's just like a pros and cons at this point. On the bright side, you can be one of the first EOS projects that boosts the network, as compared to Ethereum, where there's a sea of different projects and everybody is doing it. So, and then the last point is the current state. So I had to add this slide like last week, based on like recent events that are happening on both networks. Actually, both networks had very bad news, but hopefully good news for improvements to the network. So everybody probably familiar with Fcoin. It's like a new centralized exchange that is building on Ethereum. And what they do as a stunt is basically they hijack the transactions that started creating transactions on the network, which kind of bloated the network and increased, basically developers who are also using the network were not able to benefit from the current bandwidth because one, the prices of gas increased and the number of transactions was too much for the current state of Ethereum. That is definitely going to be solved with their latest updates for the network that they're building, which is good. But as it is the current state for the next probably a year, in my opinion, you need to be aware that this can happen, and your application needs to have a fallback. If you realize that you're actually you're paying a lot more gas now, or your transactions are a lot slower and they're taking so long to finish, your application needs to be able to queue them and then do some stuff off-chain until the network is in a better state. As far as I know, the issue is still the prices are still very high at this point, and there is not much that can happen other than just wait until the network is back and less congested, and then continue forward with the lower prices. On the other side of the news, EOS had after the launch, there were some issues with mainly, I guess, BPs and governance, and there was a lot of talks of updating the constitution, the EOS constitution, and to allow for a different kind of governance. But the fact that there was a problem and there was a fast follow-up, not solution, but at least proposals makes me like more confident in the way things will be solved on EOS as compared to other platforms. But at the same time, like the fact that something like as big as EOS, something that have a lot of money like Block One, ended up like releasing software that could have been a lot like more thought of or improved to some extent, makes me worry about like the future. But it's more, I guess in a sense it's more risky to build something on EOS today. I'd rather wait until most of these issues are weeded out and figured. On the other side is the RAM. So just previous slide actually. So the volatility in the RAM prices and the fact that it just opened, when they opened up the marketplace, the prices went up and people started doing it as like a marketplace where they can sell and buy and make a lot of profit very quickly, caused some issues from like a DApp developer perspective. But one of the reasons we decided to go with EOS is because, oh, RAM is cheap, we can actually do everything on chain, and now we have to rethink the entire process based on the fact that, given that RAM is a volatile, like coin, I guess, in a sense, you can just call it another form of currency. It's just going to be an issue for us to think of our budgets for our application when building it. And it just like basically set us back from an engineering perspective a little bit because we were not expecting that to happen, and it did happen. And I want to jump into a little bit more details about RAM in the next slide. So what is RAM? So RAM is random access memory. It's a fast read write. It's very